Everybody's focused on the quarterback, and certainly his mistakes have cost you. But the reality of it is your team's not physically tough. When you're 25th in points allowed defensively, when you're 31st in touchdowns allowed through the air, when you're 25th in yards allowed in passing, at some point this has got to stand on the table for you, and you're going to have to take accountability.
The appointments are lined up.
You waiting for somebody in there?
Got an appointment. And it's not about what you want to hear, but what you need to hear.
It's not personal. It's strictly business. It's time you and me had a private talk, Winger. Step into my office.
It's Step Into My Office with Michael Lombardi. Mr. Lombardi, we'll see you now.
Ryan Hunter on the voiceover, if you heard what he said there. It's not what you want to hear. It's what you need to hear, Michael. So Raheem Morris is knocking at the door. They lose again. 42-21 to the Vikes. It wasn't pretty. They've now lost 4 in a row. Kirk Cousins has no touchdown passes and 8 picks in that span. Michael, I want you to hear from Raheem, and then he will see you.
Everything is always discussed when you go watch the tape and do all those type of things. But like Kirk Cousins is our quarterback. We'll have the ability to go watch this tape just like we do every single week. You know, Kirk played significantly better than he did the week before. We got a chance to go out there and focus on us and get a chance to go out there and really work on what we do and what we do well. And we'll do whatever is best to go win football games. And Kirk's definitely a part of that.
Well, Raheem, since the bye week, you haven't really done anything very good. I mean, you know, I thought you played better defense against the Chargers, but you weren't able to win that game. You gave that game away with 4 turnovers, and then this week you give this game away with 3 turnovers. But I think the bigger issue for you, everybody wants to talk about Kirk Cousins because you gave him $100 million, and you got Michael Penix sitting next to you. Is at what point do you take responsibility for having the 31st worst defense on third down in the National Football League? How do you handle the fact that you can't cover anybody? You paid A.J. Terrell all this money. You really can't. You've been improving the pass rush. There's no question. You had 3 sacks in the first quarter yesterday. But the idea is you can't cover anybody and you can't play defense effectively enough. And so, to me, Cousins is going to take all the heat. But when you're 25th in points allowed defensively, when you're 31st in touchdowns allowed through the air, when you're 25th in yards allowed in passing, at some point this has got to stand on the table for you, and you're going to have to take accountability. Everybody's focused on the quarterback, and certainly his mistakes have cost you. But the reality of it is your team's not physically tough. You can't stop the run when you need to stop the run. You're 15th in yards per attempt average against the run, 18th, excuse me. And teams seem to push you around, and the longer the game goes, the less effective your team becomes, which is really based on you. So, to me, this isn't about watching the tape. This is about understanding what the problems are, identifying them, and at this point of the season, fixing them.
Well said. And I still couldn't believe all summer long. Remember, the Falcons were odds-on favorites to win the division before they ever played a game. I just never understood that. Caleb,
not here, but not on our show.
Right.
They weren't, but they were clearly. Yes,
amazing. Kalen DeBoer has got to be a little bit disappointed. We understand that Roll Tide will not be in the inaugural college football playoff. They did have 3 losses, 9-3, but we know the schedule. It's not easy. They did have wins over, say, Georgia, LSU, South Carolina, but those losses to Vandy and Oklahoma and Tennessee are going to keep them out. Now you're going to go play in the ReliaQuest Bowl against Michigan. Michael, what's the message that you have for Kalen in year 1 down in Tuscaloosa?
We're on to 2025. I mean, this is an opportunity for us to get better. And if anybody doesn't want to play in the game, anybody don't want to be here, that's fine. We're going to find players that do, and we're going to work to get better. Look, the reality of it is you got to learn from these mistakes you made. You got to learn from losing to Vanderbilt after a big win. You got to learn to go into play Oklahoma and having everything in front of you and playing your worst game of the year. You know, you truly were two flips of the coin of a team. You were great against Georgia. You were horrible against Oklahoma. And then you've got to correct that consistency. And I think it's important because if you get too caught up in the politics, look, the one thing we learned Sunday afternoon by 1 o'clock before the NFL started was you can change how many teams get into the NFL, into the NC2A committee. You can change the playoff brackets. You can call it something else. You could do. But it's still a political game. There's still a bunch of politicians in a room trying to figure something out that's in over their head. There's no football expert in the room. And so when you want to try to engage yourself in politics, you're only going to get in trouble. So for you, stay out of that conversation and move forward and just talk about how do we fix this team moving forward.
So close to getting in, but yet so far on the outside looking in now as SMU gets that final spot. You know, I kind of bought into the Thomas Brown interim head coach first game. Let's see the bump in San Francisco. And boy, my bet got bumped very quickly. It looked ugly. 35-13 loss to the Niners. So I know Thomas Brown's gone from, passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator to head coach very quickly here, Michael. What's the message to Thomas Brown after a very disappointing opener as the head coach?
Even if you're an interim head coach, you have to set standards of excellence. That's part of what you do. And so because that's what you do, they didn't meet that standard of excellence. And so today in your meeting and your team, you got to remind them, look, I know I'm the substitute teacher here, but you're going to be held accountable. And accountability starts with we're going to watch this tape. And if you don't want to play or do the things that we need to do to help our team win, you won't play. You won't play. Maybe you'll be here next year because your contract, but as long as I'm the interim coach, I'm only going to play the players that adhere to the standard of excellence, and we're going to move forward on that. So I think that's really going to be the message you have to deliver. You can get into the minutia of why we didn't win the game. You got destroyed initially. Your team wasn't ready to play. You've got to be reflective of that as well. You've got to take accountability for the slow start and for the inability for the offense to gain any yards with you in the leadership role. So, but I think you've got to send a message. The standard of excellence must increase. It increases for me, and it increases for you.
Certainly, there are owners in the NFL that may be a little bit more cachet than others. That last name Mara means a lot in New York. It's not pretty right now. They're in prime position possibly to get the number one pick now because they are 2-11. That's normally where you don't want to be. There was actually a plane that flew over the stadium yesterday at MetLife, and it read, "Mr. Mara, enough. Please fix this dumpster fire." Michael, what's your message for John Mara today as he steps into your office to try to do just that?
And it's been my message for the last 3, 4, 5 years. John, at some point, you're going to have to find somebody who will give you an honest evaluation of your franchise. And then you're going to have to listen to them. Because right now, all you've done since you've hired Ben McAdoo, since you've hired Pat Shurmur, since you've hired Dave Gettleman, since you've hired Joe Judge, since you've hired Joe Shane, since you've hired Brian Daboll, all you've done is move deck chairs around on the Titanic. The ship's still sinking. Just everybody has a different view of the ocean. And so if you don't want to listen to somebody and tell you the truth, if you don't want to bring somebody in who's been completely correct about your team for the last 7 years, then you really don't want to get better. You really don't want to get better. You need outside eyes. You need somebody to give you the hard truth. See, because the biggest problem in the Giant organization is simply this. They associate devotion as the greatest virtue as opposed to loyalty. Loyal people tell you the truth. Devoted people tell you what you want to hear. And that's why the Giants have struggled so bad, because they're listening to those devoted people who are telling John what he needs to hear. If you think, if for 1 second, that this course of action that Joe Shane has taken over the last 3 years, he's been the general manager, eating as many of his peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that he can accumulate, which may not be there anymore if Bobby Kennedy becomes the Food and Drug Administrator. We might lose those. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. You're crazy. This team's worse than when he got it. They haven't gotten better. You're worse at quarterback than you were, even now. You're worse. You're just as bad in the offensive line. And for all this money you spent on the defensive line, it has improved one thing. So you need a dose of reality. You need somebody to come in and tell you the truth. And the problem is you're scared of the truth because the truth requires changes. And you don't want to make any changes.
They couldn't wait to run out Tom Coughlin. They couldn't wait for Eli to step aside for Danny Dimes. And I kept saying then, be careful what you wish for. Sometimes it's not always greener on the other side.
Thanks for watching, but don't let the betting insights end here. If you want an extra edge this football season, you can get a month of VSiN Pro right now absolutely free. That means access to our betting insights, analysis, and tools like our betting splits at zero cost to you. Click the link in the description to sign up.